I'm Jeremy Newmark. I'll be chairing this evening's meeting, and I'd like to welcome members of the public, colleagues and officers. In order to manage the business as efficiently as possible, I'll invite people to speak one at a time to ensure their contributions are properly heard. So please don't speak unless invited to do so. I think everybody here is familiar with our fire evacuation procedure, so we will move straight on to agenda item 1, communications and apologies, of which there are none. Agenda item 2, presentation of petitions, of which there are none. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Any members have any interest to declare? None, thank you. Agenda item 4, speeches by non-cabinet members. The usual rules will apply, and welcome to Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Cohen. Agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy to agree for me to sign the minutes of our last meeting held on the 14th of January? Thank you, that's agreed. I will sign them after the meeting to save time. Item 6 is recommendations from scrutiny committees, of which there are none received. Agenda item 7 are key decisions, first of which is 7.1, the pay award and pay policy statement. I'm going to ask Councillor Shenton to introduce this item and then ask Councillor Giorgio for any further introductory comments.
Thank you, Leader. The only thing I was going to mention in regards to the pay award and pay policy does come into the revenue budget setting, which I shall address shortly. It does say that the local pay award of 3% for all staff, that was as proposed to the Personnel Committee. The proposal that we will be putting forward in the revenue budget is for 4%, but we will discuss that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newmark. Yes, just to reiterate that these papers were published at the end of January, and we had our meeting with personnel and LJC, where we spoke with the LJC, who initially asked for a pay increase of, I believe 3.7% in the end. But we felt that we needed to do more to help frontline services at this time. And so as a committee, we discussed giving an award of 4%, and looking at the budget, we felt that we had sufficient headroom in order to provide that. I'd also just mention that the pay policy statement as well, we've looked at kind of all the packages and things like that we're providing to our staff. And also things like our gender pay gap. For the most part, our gender pay gap in terms of actual pay is actually in favour of females, but there is a gender bonus pay gap that's in favour of males, but that's explained by the retention payments that we pay to some of our waste staff, which is one of the areas that we struggle with recruitment. And so we understand that that's a reasonable reason why there's a difference in that area.
Thank you, and also at this point thank our Head of Human Resources, Claire Noble, for all of the work that went into both elements of this report. Visiting members, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Our staff are the backbone of this council. They are our most valuable part of the Hertsmere family. They support residents in difficult circumstances, deliver frontline services, manage complex cases and ensure this authority functions efficiently and professionally. It is therefore essential that when we consider pay, we genuinely listen to our staff and listen to the Personnel Committee. The Personnel Committee has examined the detail, looked at benchmarking, considered recruitment and retention challenges, and reflected on staff feedback. Their recommendations are not made lightly. They are rooted in evidence and experience. We have to acknowledge the difficult truth. Over recent years, many staff feel that pay settlements have not kept pace with industry standards or the rising cost of living. When settlements fall behind the wider market, we risk losing skilled officers and struggle to recruit new talents. That ultimately impacts service delivery to our residents. Pay should not be seen purely as a cost pressure. It's an investment in stability, morale and retention. When staff feel valued, performance improves, loyalty strengthens and the whole organisation benefits. So in summary, I just urge the Cabinet to align with the Personnel Committee's recommendation and award our staff a 4% pay rise. This would send a clear message that we recognise their contribution, that we are listening and that we are committed to keeping Hertsmere an employer of choice. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as members made clear previously, the recommendation is a 4% pay rise. Anything else from visiting members? No. Any further comments from Cabinet members? No. If there are none, can I ask members to firstly note the feedback from the staff consultation, which is set out in Appendix A with your papers, and to agree to recommend to Council a local pay award of 4% for all staff for the forthcoming financial year, as contained within the pay policy statement. Are members happy to agree those recommendations? Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 7.2, setting the capital budget for 25-26 through 27-28. And I will ask Councillor Shenton to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I would just point out to people that we have slightly reordered the budget papers this year. In the past, the capital budget was done after the revenue budget, but as it is significant to the revenue budget, it's better that it comes first. This is a snapshot. It's a position in time because this is a 4-year rolling programme, and most of these bids that we describe have been to either Asset Management Panel or indeed to Cabinet and full Council in the past. The new bids are shown on Table 2, totalling £6.5 million. The largest of which is £2 million for the Elstree Film Studio Immersive Experience. And there is a variance of 15.2 million made up of 14.6 million pounds worth of slippage, £1 million of underspend and 422,000 of overspend. The noteworthy projects that are slipping are the listed in 7.3, so I'm sure you can all read, I won't list them out. £3 million worth of projects have been removed from the capital programme, in particular the roof of this building. And of the new capital bids, 14.8 million, they are listed in Table 6 on page 8. As I say, this is a snapshot in time, showing the change, showing that plenty of work is going on and that the capital projects are planned and underway. So I would recommend the recommendations 1.1 through 1.4, to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. Visiting members, any comments on the capital budget? None. Cabinet members? None. People keeping their powder dry, as is the tradition. Okay, in which case I shall ask members of the Cabinet to agree to note the revised capital programme budget for the period covered, to consider the draft capital programme for the period under consideration with the changes that Councillor Shenton outlined, being the removal of 3.14 million of capital projects and the profiled budget across the 3-year period, and finally to recommend the draft capital programme to full council for approval. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 7.3, setting the revenue budget, and I shall ask Councillor Shenton to introduce this one.
Thank you again, Leader. Well, the key recommendation, I think, in this report is the 4% pay rise proposed by the Personnel Committee, which we've just discussed. This is slightly higher than inflation, but essential for recruitment and retention of our staff, who are our greatest asset. The Council is required by law to present a balanced budget, the obvious consequence of which is that if we choose to increase a budgetary cost or reduce a revenue, then we must explain where the balancing funding comes from. The Council has received one-year settlements for many years now, and a welcome change is that this year the government has issued a multi-year settlement that they choose to call fair funding. I'm not sure everyone has the same understanding of what is fair, and in our case, the government's interpretation of fair funding means that we get less money. Core spending power of 19.43 million is up from 19.33 million in the final settlement as against the provisional settlement, and 19.9 million when adding in business rate growth. The key is that retained business rate growth was not part of the core spending power, but is still real money. The net budget requirement for 26/7 is 18.28 million, nominally up from 13.96 million last year. And we have a balanced budget for this year and the next 2 years. So it is a very positive position that we're able to report to Council, and I recommend the recommendations 1.3 through 1.4 that we adopt the budget as described. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. Look, obviously, since we last looked at this, we have had the confirmation of the final settlement, which, as Councillor Shenton said, the provisional settlement was one that certainly appeared to have worked out positively for us, and pleasingly, the final settlement has worked out even more positively for us, with some further additional increases, most significantly the £93,000 additional funding for homelessness related expenditure. This is a total of more now than 19% increase in our core spending power over the 3-year period in comparison to the previous comparable period. And the sort of rather dry formula sort of betrays a lot of detail and a lot of technical work that has gone into this from central government. And perhaps the most important scenario is that we now have the stability of a multi-year settlement, and for the first time, I believe, in recent memory, we're able to present a 3-year medium-term forecast showing balanced budgets for each of those 3 years. So great work locally and positive changes nationally. Councillor Bright.
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't discuss the fair funding formula because we're getting on so well this evening. But it's an interesting act, not from yourself, but the way that everything's been put together and managed to be disseminated. I'm glad that we're coming out of it better than some areas and better than we thought that we would. I wanted to speak very briefly about the 4%, because I think that whilst it's true to say that inflation, it's slightly above inflation, we all know there's different types of inflation, and that the sorts of inflation that our staff would be spending money on, food, etc., some of it's well above 4%. So whilst there are other things that have dropped in price, there are things that are still going on above that level. So I do think it's appropriate. Obviously, we do have concerns, as we have done for several years, that you get into the Hertfordshire inflation rates of its own by staff getting paid a certain amount, then they go elsewhere and they have to put their amounts up a bit to attract them and so on. But that's just the nature, I'm afraid, of the game that we're in. The important thing is to show staff that we're considerate of them. They're not just numbers, and the percentages do take into account the effects that spending on their average everyday life expenses take into account. So I think this is a very good message to be sending out.
Thank you. Any other comments from the middle of the chamber? No, or none. Comments from members? Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to point out that the budget consultation is still ongoing, runs until the 15th of February, and can be found online, typing in budget consultation Hertsmere 26-27, and we encourage as many residents as possible to provide feedback on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important. I think there's some comms going out this evening or tomorrow with a reminder to that. Any further comments? Councillor Sullivan, you sort of missed your chance, but I'm happy to let you intervene now.
Sorry, just a small comment as Councillor Bright was just reminding me. I had an email from a resident not that long ago at just 5:10 asking if there was going to be any consultations in person anywhere or any hard copy formats throughout the borough for people who aren't able to really kind of interpret that information online.
I don't believe there's an in-person consultation, but there are hard copy documents available, I think, at libraries and other venues around the borough. I'm sure that if you want to put the resident in touch with the comms department, they'll be able to let them know where those are available. Councillor Giorgio.
Just to point out, similarly with my last item, that with the pay award, the 3% initially being budgeted and then that increase of 4%, that I believe there's a couple of places in the report where that will be obviously updated before it goes to full council as well in this report. And similarly with the additional funding of £58,000 for the electoral services, which we'll come on to later, and the housing support fund being in here as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no further comments, I'll invite members to agree the 4 recommendations, the first of which is to consider the draft revenue budget position for next year and the net budget requirement. Secondly, to consider consultation responses set out in section 13. The 3 specific ones are set out in the recommendation at the start of the report. One is the 4% pay award, which I think actually comes in higher than even the highest inflation index, to address Councillor Bright's point. The additional 40k for housing support funding and the additional 58k for the electoral services restructure agreed by Personnel Committee and due for approval later in this meeting. Then thirdly, to recommend the draft revenue budget to full council for approval, and finally to consider that medium-term financial plan through to the end of financial year 28-29 with the balanced budget baked in as previously outlined. Are members happy to agree those recommendations? Thank you. We will now move to item 7.4, which is the last of the formal budget reports, and this one is council tax setting and collection fund levies for the financial year 2026-2027. Councillor Shenton.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this item is to recommend to Council the increase in the council tax levy for financial year 26-7. By law, the Council must set a balanced budget before the 11th of March. The proposed rise in council tax for next financial year is 2.99%. This equates to an increase of £6.28 on a Band D property to £216.34 for a non-parished area. Inflation, as measured by CPI for September, was 3.8%. So in real terms, next year's council tax represents a reduction of 0.8%. The proposed total council tax levies for next financial year are 11.5 million, of which 9.3 million are due to the council's 26-27 general fund budget and 2.2 million used to pay town and parish precepts. As ever, the precepts requested by the town and parish councils greatly exceeds those of the borough. Aldenham's increase is 9.6%, Elstree and Borehamwood's 17.1%, South Mims and Ridge 34.5%, and Shenley an eye-watering 57.5%. Special expenses for non-parished areas are proposed to increase by 2.99% from £18.54 to £19 and a penny. I move that we accept the council tax setting as described in section 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. Anything from the members in the middle? No. Anything from Cabinet members on this? No. In which case, I invite members of the Cabinet to recommend that the council tax levy be increased by the 2.99%, working out at £6.28 for an average Band D property per year. Secondly, to recommend that the total council tax levy for next year be utilised on the basis of 9.33 million to balance the general fund budget, 2.21 million to pay town and parish council requirements, with the caveat that the South Mims and Ridge precept requirement is still in draft form and subject to approval at a forthcoming parish council meeting. Has that now been approved? Councillor Myers, can you help us with that?
Yeah, that was approved last Thursday, so no, that information is incorrect. It has been approved.
That's what I thought when it said on here the forthcoming meeting is on the 5th of February. Well, that's happened already. In which case, that recommendation will simply be that the amount of 2.21 million is used to pay town and parish council requirements. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. We'll now move on to agenda item 7.5, the Hertsmere Vision and Corporate Plan 2026 to 2028. And I wanted to open this item by thanking our policy manager Liz Gore and Hilary Shade, our assistant director of partnerships, for the immense amount of work that has gone into this. Essentially, the sort of new style vision and plan document stems from the work that was undertaken both during and as a consequence of the LGA Local Government Association Corporate Peer Challenge exercise, which is the benefit of those not familiar with the terminology, sort of like Ofsted for councils. That took place around 16 months ago, and last week we had the return visit of the peer team, and whilst we're still awaiting their final reports, they did present to management board with an overwhelmingly positive set of feedback, and amongst that positive feedback was the recognition that we'd moved from a scenario in which this council had multiple sets of visions, corporate aims, objectives and plans and so on, to one simplified set of documents that set out our vision and corporate plan, and that those documents are very much rooted in and mapped on to the priorities that the management board, the senior leadership team and cabinet working together have identified and agreed as part of a process of prioritisation that followed that original corporate peer challenge exercise. Those priorities are outlined under the 4 planks of growing opportunities, secure homes, strong futures, community equals place, and delivering excellence. This document did go to it was actually the joint meeting of scrutiny a couple of weeks ago. Number of amendments have been made since then, including an even greater simplification of the context material on the front page, and sort of various other helpful and positive changes to wording that was suggested, but the substance remains the same. It remains rooted in those priorities driven by the peer review and the subsequent process. I will leave it there and invite comments from visiting members. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also add my thanks to Liz Gore and Hilary Shades for bringing in the changes following scrutiny and also writing a clear vision document. I'm glad to see also that following scrutiny, and further to my correctly questioning of the figures in the draft document presented to us at that meeting, and despite the mocking of me by a senior member at that meeting for drawing members' attention to this, It's now finally been clarified that the affordable housing completions quoted in the vision document are Hertfordshire-wide and not specific to Hertsmere. So my question is twofold to you, Councillor Newmark. Firstly, given that this is the Hertsmere vision and every other figure on that page relates specifically to Hertsmere, why is the only time a county-wide statistic is used in this document in relation to affordable homes, and why was the Hertsmere figure not included? And secondly, can the administration confirm what the actual Hertsmere affordable housing completions figure is for the same period, so that elected members and the public have an accurate and honest picture of local delivery? And it's the question I asked at scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Look, I think it's perfectly reasonable in a section headed Hertsmere in context that we provide context on a county-wide basis. It's not correct that that is the only figure quoted in a county-wide basis. For instance, if you look at employment rate, it's very clearly set out that we give the county-wide Hertfordshire context. All of this data has actually been provided by Herts Insight, County Council level. You will see that we also use the county-wide Hertfordshire context in respect of household occupancy ratings. So it's not correct to say that we only use the Hertfordshire-wide data for that particular figure. And whilst I have a pretty clear idea of what our housing completion rate is and how positively it compares to that of previous administrations, in order that we get this completely right, I will ask that officers respond to you in writing after the meeting. Further comments from visiting members? Councillor Bright.
It was just, thank you, Chair, just the wider point of once we hear where the government is with its decision over local government reorganisation, possibly September time, how quickly will we need to or wish to adapt ourselves in relation to this plan moving forward when we have a better idea of what Hertsmere won't just look like, but how it will then dovetail in with other authorities as we become a different authority.
Thank you. And I think that's a really helpful and pertinent question. I think that we have made it clear in big bold letters on the front page that this vision and plan is to see us through to 2028, the year in which the new unitary authority we're part of, whatever that is, will have its vesting day. And part of the reason for that is, as an administration, we have taken the view that there is a danger in preparation for LGR becoming a kind of race to the bottom and becoming an excuse for not doing very much and putting everything to one side. I think the attitude we have taken is that we have a aspirational and ambitious agenda, a lot of stuff that we feel we need to get done to lock in benefits and opportunities for the people that this council currently exists to serve and represent, and our focus is going to be on delivering that. Obviously, there will be a programme of work around what I would call the nuts and bolts of preparation for LGR and a smooth transition, but our vision and our plan is to stay very focused on delivering the priorities that we have set out for the residents of what is currently Hertsmere between now and 2028, and we're not going to allow the onset of a new unitary authority to sort of divert us from that. There's nothing else from members in the middle. I will invite comments from Cabinet members. I see Councillor Gray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. From a practical standpoint and in relation to my portfolio, there will be some minor changes going forward. The performance management will operate under a new framework designed to capture information on service delivery, which will be supported by contextual data that explains why particular opportunities and challenges matter locally. From Q1 26-27, we will now be reporting reporting the performance of the corporate plan on a quarterly basis to the Operations Scrutiny Committee instead of Cabinet. I believe this will kind of strengthen oversight and enable more detailed scrutiny on the performance indicators as set out, and allow more time to actually examine those at a deeper level. Each report will include statistical data, a supporting narrative which quantified indicators to reflect the work undertaken, and benchmarking information that's appropriate to that individual key performance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you. If it helps Councillor Cohen on the question asking about the figures for supply of accommodation in Hertsmere, I'm not sure of the effective date of supply, whether this is by completion or by letting, but the information we have, it won't be that much different in any case, but the information that I have in respect of lettings in Hertsmere of affordable accommodation were 97 in 24-25, which compares to 24 in 23-24 and 15 in 22-23. So it is moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on Councillor Bright's comment around sort of, you know, what comes next, so to speak, beyond the LGR. And I think, although I'm not a county council, obviously others are, dual hatters here, but speaking from my perspective as the Hertsmere representative on Hertfordshire Waste Partnership and HCCSP, the Sustainability Partnership, I think it's fairly clear that there is sort of an absolutely overwhelming sort of pulling in the same direction when it comes to the various local authorities, districts and borough councils, when it comes to ensuring that we don't drop the ball, that we think far beyond 2028. And I'm sure other portfolio holders would have similar experience.
Any other comments from Cabinet members? No. Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you. It would be remiss of me not to mention the section on delivering excellence as part of my portfolio with resources and IT. We're already making some progress on delivering some of the items that we've set out here, such as rolling out equipment upgrades to staff, utilising our existing capabilities such as SharePoint, Power BI and AI. Later this evening we've got an AI policy that's coming to all of your attention for approval. We're also already rolling out LED screens to key sites across the borough, and also looking at ways that we can help with our recruitment and retention outcomes, first of all with the pay award that we've already discussed, but later on with the progression policy that we're here to discuss as well. So some of the items that are in there we're already making progress on this evening, and we'll be looking to do all that we can over the course of the next year or two to make sure that we continue to make Hertsmere a great place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I'll invite Cabinet members to approve the revised Hertsmere vision for 26-28 to full council as a recommendation, and to approve for recommendation to full council the corporate plan for 2026 through 2028. Is that agreed? Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is non-key decisions, the first of which is item 6.1, pay progression policy, which Councillor Giorgio just effectively flagged and introduced in the previous item. Would you like to say any more on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as we are aware, we're heading towards local government reorganisation, and we are also in a position whereby we are recruiting staff to roles, and we were in a position whereby they were having to wait up to 3 years in order to have their pay reviewed, in order to make sure that they were on the kind of pay grade that they should be for somebody who's competent in their role. We think that that was too long to wait for 3 years for somebody to have that review, and so we want to bring that forward towards 1 year. The reason being is it means that people will be able to, first of all, be able to prove that they're able to do the job earlier, But also it helps us to move more in line with the National Joint Council pay scales, which I think is important for councils at this time, especially with local government reorganisation, because as we may merge with other councils and other authorities, people will naturally need to be able to see whereabouts they stand with employees at those other organisations. And so by doing this at this time, I think it's a good time to make sure that people are able to prove their competency in certain areas. And also when we do merge with other councils, we'll be able to show where we have staff at certain levels that we may be able to ensure that we're properly staffed. And if there's any areas so we don't have enough apprentices, or we do have too many senior staff, whatever it might be, or vice versa, we can that authority will be able to make that decision and kind of think about that at that stage. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giorgio. Look, I think this is a really important document. In some ways, everybody this time of year focuses in on the precise percentage of the pay award, which obviously matters. But what became clear from our ongoing staff surveys through Zen City, but also through the engagement with staff that happened as part of the peer review process, was that our existing system effectively created a kind of glass ceiling when it came to progression through the scales. And whatever the intention on paper, the reality was when people got to midpoint in the scale, it was certainly very difficult, and there were certainly significant delays in their ability to progress onwards and upwards. So whilst there's an awful lot in here, what this does do is deal with removing that barrier so that expectations and the actuality of progress within the different bandings, as it were, on the scale is a much improved scenario. And I think that that is going to mean an awful lot to a significant number of staff. So thank you to Councillor Giorgio and to Claire again for all the work that's gone into this in consultation with, I know it's still listed here as ILGA, and it was ILGA when they did the review, but they're now Local Government East. Visiting members. Councillor Bright.
Well, thank you very much. So we're in a very sensitive time. We talk about LGR because this is kind of hovering over all our heads, but we're assuming it's going to happen, right? It's, based on that assumption, it's going to happen. So the moment it does, it will bring hopefully some certainty to staff across the districts and the boroughs in Hertfordshire, because of course it's a very difficult time for all of them. We don't know how many people are going to be needed in the future because we don't know what type of organisation is going to come forward. Once that becomes more clear, whether it's 2, 3 and 4, etc., and what the needs will be, will we sit down more with the other authorities within that potential unitary and decide these things together, or will we continue to go off on our own and seek to not just employ but also work out rates? My concern goes back to the comment I made slightly earlier about pan-Hertfordshire inflation rates among staff, because all of a sudden everyone wants to get hold of people when they know exactly how it's going to be. So as I say, it's a very sensitive time. We always want to make sure we have the best people, but that may necessarily be within the confines of a new type of group, and it's whether or not we will be part of those conversations with other members of that group to work out what's best for staff and also for the new organisation moving forward.
Thank you, and I'll have a stab at answering that. I think that the target point for the new authority will be to reach a scenario where there is a harmonisation of staff, remuneration terms and conditions, albeit with allowances for legacy arrangements that will undoubtedly need to be brought in. Ultimately, pay policy will be a matter for the new authority, and it will be one of the decisions that we would expect the shadow authority that is likely to be elected in 2027 to take. And still, until that point, notwithstanding any financial constraints that may come about as a result of the structural order the structural change order, we retain the autonomy to do things our way. And I think particularly because we're, I think, the only authority in Hertfordshire that's not part of the national joint agreement, I think it's important that we are able to maintain that autonomy, and I think that's part of the reason we have put this in place with a view to covering the period between now and the new authority taking over. I know that at chief exec level, county-wide, there's already a lot of work and thought that's gone into this, and I think that you're right. When we do know who our partners are in a new authority, we will be engaging in conversations with them, but I would not expect those to be conversations that would result in any changes to what we do here and now. I would expect those will be conversations aimed at smoothing the path for the forthcoming new authority, and the reality is that that will be a decision made by the shadow unitary, and it may well be that the partners we have, or that partnership group, will have a different view, and that the shadow authority will sort of disagree with that. There's too many imponderables at this stage. Anything else from members in the middle? No. Anything else from cabinet members? Councillor Giorgio?
Just to also add that, yes, I or any members of this chamber, I should imagine, would be happy to speak with any new authority as and when they are formed, in order to help ease the transition to that new authority arrangements. But also, if we do end up in a situation with 4 potentially unitary authorities, for example, I do think that having those 4 unitaries and also town and parish councils competing for staff, and to make sure that they're being competitive with both their rates in both directions, actually not paying too much and not paying too little, I think is a good thing, that we'll have more competition in the borough rather than one very large Hertfordshire County Council, who, if you want to work at a county level, that they're the only council that is, you know, reasonably within distance to work for, unless you're like a council with, like us, on the border of another one. So for people in the middle of the county, for example, they'll have more choice of which council they choose to work for. Yeah.
It's worth adding to that. Obviously, it's not just the unitaries and the towns and parishes. We, I think, collectively across the county have indicated to government that we want to see a strategic combined authority in place by May 2028, and obviously that will require staffing arrangements of its own, and it will also provide an opportunity for, or a set of opportunities for existing staff. Good. If there are no further comments on this one, I'd like to ask members of the Cabinet to approve the financial implications of the revised policy that are set out in Appendix 1. The policy itself has already been approved by Personnel Committee. Is that agreed? Thank you. Now we are back to Councillor Giorgio to introduce the AI policy with a set of remarks that he assures us he's written himself rather than via chat to GPT.
I'll be speaking from the heart, as I think this is an important policy for our council, and one which I think we should have made sooner. I think it's important that we set out for our staff and also for the wider public what their expectations should be in relation to our use of AI, because it's not something that's going to go away. It's something that we may see increase in the public use. So we need to make it clear for everybody involved what kind of AI systems that we use, and also to set clear boundaries based on if we're going to procure future services in the AI sector and AI products, what our expectations are from the private sector in terms of those types of services that we may be consuming. I'm happy to say that this is a working document. We initially, actually, to kind of make sure that we're making use of things like SharePoint and OneDrive, actually shared it with all of our cabinet members as we were developing it, to make sure that everybody had an early look at it, in order to make sure that they're able to add any points that they make, or any omissions, or anything that they think could be changed. And so I appreciate that we have our Chair of Policy Review here, and he's emailed our Head of Service to say that he would like to bring it to the Policy Review Committee. and of course you're free to do so, and any recommendations that you make we'll happily consider. I think that using AI in the council is a bit of a double-edged sword. We have to be careful in the ways that we use it, but also we can't kind of pretend that it's not available, because there will be other councils and private organisations using it. But we just need to make sure that we provide some guardrails around our usage of it, and also training to staff. So this includes some training for some of our staff, and also some licensing set up for purview in order to make sure that we've got oversight of how it's being used in the organisation. Because many products already come packaged with AI, things like Adobe Acrobat or things like Google, when you do a search now, will often include AI features. And so if we're not getting ahead of this, we may find that people are using it without our knowledge, and perhaps coming to conclusions that perhaps they wouldn't have otherwise done if they hadn't been using AI. So we have to be guarded against what they call hallucinations, which is where an AI kind of thinks it's got the idea of something and makes a mistake, basically, which is something that humans do as well. I think we have to, people often judge AI kind of on a basis that, you know, it has to be perfect, but actually what we need is an AI that can do a job of a human, or certain humans that could do that maybe at a junior level, when it frees up those junior staff to be able to do higher level work. So I think that's where we're at with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to add to that the scope of this policy is restricted to the council itself. Obviously, council subsidiaries will either have or be in the process of developing AI policies that are specific to their sectors. There are big ethical issues around use of AI, particularly in the film and TV sector, and in relation to the immersive experience company, and those subsidiaries are working on, and in case studios already have existing policies. So this is for us here. Members in the middle. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you to Lee Gallagher and Councillor Giorgio for the work on this report so far. AI is a great tool if used correctly. It can support productivity, improve efficiency, and help us process information more effectively. But it must be used responsibly and with clarity. Having a policy is sensible. It provides a framework where previously there was none. However, if we're going to adopt this policy, it needs tightening, particularly around the role of members and the handling of sensitive information. I believe a few tweaks would greatly benefit all users of this policy, and I hope they can be considered tonight. Councillors are within the scope of this document, but our responsibilities are not clearly spelt out. Members use email, draft motions, prepare speeches, respond to constituents, and communicate publicly. AI can assist with those tasks, but it does not replace judgment. Members must still exercise due diligence over what we say and publish. If we use AI to support our work, we remain responsible for checking accuracy, context, and tone. The policy should make that expectation clear so there's no misunderstanding. Secondly, the policy refers to a central register of approved AI tools, which is welcome, but it does not make clear how accessible that list will be. Members need a readily accessible, available list, ideally in a simple table format, setting out approved and acceptable AI tools, their permitted uses, and any restrictions. That would give practical clarity and reduce any unintended oversights. Third, and this is crucial, the policy must clearly define the use of Part 2 information and any other restricted or confidential data. It should explicitly state that Part 2 reports, exempt information, personal data, commercially sensitive material, and any restricted datasets must not be put into public or unapproved AI systems under any circumstances. If tightly controlled internal AI environments are ever used for such material, that they must be clearly defined and formally authorised. There can't be any grey areas here. There's also some practical conduct questions. For example, are council-issued devices being used to create or distribute AI-generated memes or political imagery, even if intended humorously? That has reputational implications and should be clearly addressed with acceptable use rules. In short, AI is a powerful tool, but it's only as responsible as the person using it. If we strengthen the sections on member guidance, the approved tools, the due diligence, and restricted data covenants, we will have a policy that supports innovation while safeguarding public trust. So on that basis, I hope we have an opportunity to strengthen this policy with the hopefully positive suggestions that I've just put forward tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Look, in terms of your suggestions, all of which were positive, a number of them are actually explicitly covered already in the report. For example, paragraph 4.4 covers the input of confidential council data into external AI tools. Your first and your third recommendations are also covered in the report. So maybe Councillor Giorgio, you could cover specifically the second point that Councillor Sullivan made about the list of AI tools.
Yes, I mean, I don't have a problem with us where information doesn't have to be kept under part 2 around certain tools potentially, publishing our list of AI tools for the public, because mostly the AI tools we'll be using will be the kinds of things that many, as I've mentioned already, things like Copilot, things like Adobe Acrobat, things like that, which are probably quite understood and quite known by people in the private sector to be used for all kinds of work-related back office work and things like that. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think with the, as you mentioned, with 4.4 and also with the scope that you mentioned, under 4.1 it mentions that this does apply to councillors. And I also think though that councillors should be able to use their own judgment about where it's appropriate to use AI. We've been given some training, some of us councillors, through our own parties around making it clear, for example, if you're going to do a graphic to members of the public that you're using AI, having a little logo or a watermark there or something like that to show that you're using it, and so that you're using it in a way in which you're not misleading the public and using it in a way which is just to save time on going out and actually getting a photo of something or something like that, those kinds of things, where it's appropriate, or to touch up a photo, that kind of thing. Not to completely change what was actually in the photo. And so, yeah, I'm happy for us to do that. I think that was the two. I think there was there a third item that we haven't yet discussed?
I think it was mainly, the point I was trying to get across, maybe quite clumsily, was about readability. If it's, this intended use by councillors and staff, as a councillor, I think we could put it a bit more simple in plain terms so that we know definitely our expectation for us, because I know it says it in 4.4, but is that in a way that a member would be able to interpret that readily and know that's their expectation, or could it be a bit user-friendly?
I'll just say, if in doubt, they're welcome to reach out to our data protection officer or to a member of IT if they're unsure about their use of AI for certain types of activities. But I would think that members should be able to use their own judgment around where it's right or wrong to make use of AI. But they should also read the policy, and it will be available, obviously, to all members.
I do think that Councillor Sullivan makes a good point, and maybe the simplest thing is to produce a one-page summary with recommendations for members. It doesn't have to be part of the policy, but obviously that could just be distributed to existing members and as part of induction of any new members. Councillor Cohen.
Gallagher, and thank you, Councillor Giorgio, for a policy. We support the idea of having an AI policy. It's essential. I just wish we could have had some input, and I wrote the email to the officers because we will need to have some input based, I think, on what comments I'd like to make now, which are to be seen in a positive manner. I think this is a draft. I don't think it's clear about what it actually is or what it's trying to achieve. At the moment, if you look at it, it reads like a mixture of things. In places, it looks like a hardware and systems policy. It talks about council-managed devices, logging credentials, and monitoring of activity on the systems. In other places, it looks like it's a broad governance document about how the council should use AI in its decision-making, its procurement, and its engagement with residents. And I think they're very different processes, and it needs to be explicit at the outset which it is and where the boundaries lie. And more importantly, as Councillor Sullivan said, we do need clarity about how this applies to councillors in practice. Because for councillors, this policy only really bites when we're using council-provided hardware or accounts, an iPad, for example, or a council email. Because once you step outside that environment and onto members' own devices, acting in a political capacity, then the levers in this policy cannot realistically apply. If that is the intended position, though, it should be said plainly. If it's not, then we're into a much wider constitutional debate about regulating members' political and other activity on their own devices. And I think the lack of clarity is also made worse by the language. If you look, this policy keeps switching between words like colleagues, officers, staff, councillors, and authorised users. There's a lack of clarity about it, and also it talks about all of those when it allocates responsibilities. Sometimes colleagues appear to be officers, sometimes it seems to include councillors as well. tasks like DPIAs, EIAs, procurement checks and updating privacy notices are described in this in generic terms that could be read as falling on any colleague, when in reality they're not to do with us, they're to their specialist officer functions. If we want members and officers to understand and comply with the policy, then it has to use precise, consistent terms so that we all know what is expected of the different people listed: colleagues, officers, staff, councillors. So my ask to Cabinet is this: before we adopt it, can we tighten its drafting? Can it come to policy review? Can we be clear whether it's primarily a systems and hardware policy, or if it's a wider AI governance policy, or a combination with clearly separated parts? And we need to be explicit about what that means for us as councillors in practice. It's really important. So please tidy up the language as well, so that officers, councillors, authorised users are used consistently with distinct responsibilities. That clarity will then make the policy much more workable for staff, much more acceptable to members, and easier to explain to the public.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Look, I think certainly it's always possible to make drafting changes to reports in between Cabinet and full Council, and perhaps we'll leave you to liaise directly with Councillor Giorgio on drafting changes. If we can move to comments from Cabinet members, please, if there are any. No, Councillor Giorgio, do you want to tie this up, please?
Yes, just have to say that we are happy to work collaboratively on this in the same way that we did as a Cabinet. So what we'll probably do is share a OneDrive or SharePoint link with you to make comments and any suggestions that you have with the Policy Review Committee. I believe that the use of AI, actually, this is a great use of AI. If you want to summarise what's in the document, it's one of the great uses of AI, actually, to be able to do things like summaries. And I believe that you mentioned about it covering lots of areas. I think that is a strength, that we need to make sure that we cover both the hardware and the software and the applications that we procure, and also what the expectations of councillors are. If we need to tidy up or pretty up the way that that's presented, then I'm happy to do that. But I believe that it would be remiss of us not to address all of the different areas in which we need to, and also to make sure that we make it clear that it's all of our responsibility to just as with data security, to make sure that we use AI responsibly to make sure that we protect this reputation of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. So, allowing for any drafting changes to be agreed through Councillor Giorgio, are members happy to approve the policy as set out in Appendix 1? Agreed. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 8.3, the electoral services restructure. Councillor Shenton or Councillor Giorgio, who's going to present this? Councillor Giorgio.
Thank you. So once again, I'm speaking, but this evening we're here to agree the electoral services restructure. So as you may be aware, we do have a small team that are responsible for our electoral services, and that includes both the putting on of elections, but also lots of the behind-the-scenes work that happens in between elections around democratic services. We believe that we may have a single point of failure in a member of staff, and so we want to make sure that we are employing another member of staff to cover off that single point of failure, but also to help take on some of the increased responsibility that we may see as we have potentially some new town councils that may be formed in the future. There may be increased workload on that department, which having this extra person there, both as an extra pair of hands to help in those situations, and also should at the head of democratic services be unable to carry out some of the role for whatever reason is there on hand and trained. It's a small change to democratic services. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to make it completely easy on that team. They still have a big job to do at democratic services, but I think it's important that we do everything we can to support them to make sure that we can maintain free and fair elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from visiting members? No. Anything from Cabinet members on this one? Councillor Shenton.
I'd just like to add, as is stated in here, that the financial implications are included in the budget, so it is all fully costed. Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I think this is a very sensible option. We do have a single point of failure in that department. And I think as members, we only really bring the dark arts of electoral services into sharp focus during election times. But there is so much planned work throughout the years that take place. Not to mention the new rule changes that might see 16 and 17-year-olds being able to vote. The fact that the government is looking to introduce UK bank cards as a way of proving ID at polling stations or registering for postal votes. So the work is continuous and ongoing. It's not like the team just only comes awake 6 weeks before an election. Thank you.
Thank you. And looking to recognise veteran ID as well. That shockingly was left out originally. But I think that's right. I think there's a lot going on in this field, and that's not to mention the potential for shadow unitary elections in tandem with potential borough council elections, and certainly town and parish elections, both for existing town and parishes and potential new ones, and local governance review referenda, and at least one neighbourhood plan referendum due all over the next couple of years. And that's before we even start to talk about the possibility of a mayoral election. So it's going to be a busy period on the electoral front. No, I don't think we'll be seeing any general elections in the near future. Are members then happy to agree this is one of those where we're just agreeing the financial implications of the electoral services team restructure, because the principle and details have already been approved by Personnel Committee, and as Councillor Shenton said, the cost of £57,686 next financial year has already been incorporated into the revenue budget, and that is inclusive of on costs. I'd agreed. Thank you. So item 9 is any other business that the Chair considers urgent. There is no other urgent business, but there is, I think it would be very remiss of me under this item not to draw attention to the decision taken by the Cabinet of Hertfordshire County Council this morning to move forward with the next stage in the attempt to close St Nicholas School in Elstree Village. Cabinet, after a debate, well, it wasn't really a debate, it was a speech that lasted about 2 minutes from the Cabinet member, no comments from members of the Cabinet, and then a remark from the leader of the County Council that it was great. It's I know, a devastating decision, both for local parents, teachers, governors and residents of Elstree Village. This is an attack and part of a wider attack on village schools. And I know that both as a borough council across the political spectrum and Elstree and Bournemouth Town Council, discussions are already taking place about providing support to a potential legal challenge. But I think it's a very sad day in terms of the long and proud history of a school that has been part of the fabric and tapestry of this area for many, many years. I will invite comments. I think Councillor Bright, Steve.
Well, it was just to echo those comments, and also to thank you and Town Council colleagues for a very productive meeting that we had earlier in the week, and with members of the local community as well, to work out how we might be able to proceed. On the one hand, we have to be very sensible about knowing what our jurisdiction, our purview is financially in these matters, but at the same time we have to show that we can work together to try and do what's right for our people. And this is clearly a wrong decision by the Cabinet at County. And as I say, I just wanted to echo your comments and thank those people that were at the meeting earlier in the week. And at the moment, the fight continues. And I don't think that it'll do any harm for Cabinet and some members at County who don't really necessarily get out of their own areas to see the effects that some of their policies potentially are having on other parts of the county. And I think we must continue to do what we can to work together to fight this decision as long as we're able to do so, with hopefully a productive outcome. But whatever it is, we have to show our people that we were there for them at this very difficult time.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Councillor Shenton.
I'd just like to echo your comments, Councillor Bright's comments. I did lobby the chair of the Education Committee, but evidently to little effect. I even bought him a beer to even less effect. And I support the ongoing campaign to try and keep it going, because I'm also governor of one of the nearest schools to Elstree, to St Nicholas, and you know those children, that they're all for all the very close schools. So what happens to the children is a primary concern. Thank you.
Thank you, and also wanted to thank Councillor Oakley for the work that she undertook together with planning officers to ensure that the gap in the consultation process that saw the County Council neglect to take account of growth figures for the area was plugged, and that information was provided to County Council officers and members in great detail. Come in on that.
Thank you, Leader. It's incredibly disappointing that both officers and members at County were just not prepared to listen to what we had to say in terms of growth. I mean, one of the things I've been dealing with today is one of the developers at South Medburn Farm, which ward members will know, literally 10 minutes walking distance from the school. And developments like that, which are approved, will provide pupils for that school. Yet, as I say, both officers and members at County Council were not prepared to listen. And we provided other figures as well. They were adamant that rolls were falling. There were plenty of places at other schools. It didn't matter that the schools were not within walking distance. They weren't remotely interested in other developments which have also got planning consent along Barnet Lane. They weren't interested in the fact that with these developments come bus routes which parents and children will be able to take their children to St Nicholas just literally minutes away. I think they were very closed. Dare I say it, they'd made their decision long before they came to speak to us.
Thank you. And on that note, I will move on to item 10, dates of future meetings. And I'd like to notify people that there will be an additional meeting of Cabinet on the 25th of February at 4 p.m. The primary purpose of that meeting is to deal with a report in relation to financial matters associated with Elstree Film Studios, and there will also be two additional items on the agenda, one relating to the governance of the immersive experience, which needs formal approval from Cabinet in order to move forward, and as members know, there's a very tight time frame on that, and there will be an HR related report on the agenda at that meeting as well. So that will be on the 25th at 4 p.m, and it will be followed by the next regular meetings of the Cabinet on the 11th of March and the 15th of April. Thank you very much to all members, and we'll close the meeting at 7:07 p.m. Thank you.